Do you know I found out that nobody knows what Mischief Night is outside of Jersey? Do you guys know what Mischief Night is?
I mean, I've heard of it. We don't have it.
Maybe we should talk about that.
No, but I recently had an issue where someone was challenging me. I thought it was a national thing.
No, nobody has a clue what I'm talking about.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to imagine Hawaii has no.
Is it the night before Halloween, or is it?
Yes.
What is it? You throw eggs and shit?
Yeah. But it's
We have that.
First of all, you don't throw eggs and shit. You throw eggs and you
light shit on fire.
If you,
We need to be saving this for yeah.
That just is Halloween for of the right age in Connecticut.
I'm joined now by Senator Schatz, Senator Murphy, and Senator Booker. Thank you guys all for joining me.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for letting us be here.
Pretty psyched.
So I want to start off with kind of the most pressing issue that we're contending with right now, and that is the impending prospect of a constitutional crisis. And we've seen more and more how right-wing media very quickly has warmed up to the idea of seeing rulings that they don't like. And as we can see, obviously the executive branch is wholly owned by Trump. The legislative branch has contracted its own powers out to Trump. And so the judicial branch is really the last bulwark right now that we have to stop against his worst excesses. Now you have folks in right-wing media and in the legislative branch on the right as well saying, well, you know what, if a ruling here doesn't kind of comport with our political ideology, then really we have the prerogative to just ignore it. So as this crisis continues to bear down, I guess what's your message to folks out there who are seeing just 3 weeks in that we may be on the brink of a major problem in our democracy?
Just not to give up, not to concede that that's where we're inevitably going to end up. I do think there's a real chance that in 6 months that Trump consolidates power in a way that is more similar to autocrats in Belarus or Turkey or elsewhere. But it is not a foregone conclusion. And so it is not brave, it is not strategically sound, it is not tactically wise for us to concede as though that has already happened. What has happened over the last couple of weeks actually is that federal courts have ruled that what Trump is doing is illegal, and for the most part the Department of Justice has instructed their departments to comply with the orders. Will that stand? Will they never defy an order? Will they never precipitate a constitutional crisis? I don't know the answer to that, but I do not think we want to speak that into existence yet, because the judicial branch has stood up as a bulwark against this unlawful activity. And look, there's lots to be worried about, but I don't like to be on an anticipatory basis worried about what happens if this, what happens if that. Like we are in the middle of a fight right now. We've had actually some success in federal courts, and we need to build on that success.
I think that's right, but it is probably worth pointing out that what he has already done, that the courts have not stopped, is pretty dire, right? I mean, we sort of breezed right past the January 6th pardons in this country because I guess the idea that he was going to do that had already been normalized. But that's absolutely extraordinary. That's never happened in the history of this country, to have people who have engaged in brutal acts of violence in service of the president's political agenda be given immunization for that.
Against cops.
Against cops, right? I mean, brutally beating cops, tasering them, beating over the head with metal poles. That happened. The courts cannot overturn that. And it has real consequences for our democracy. And that stands in a list of things that he has done and already gotten away with that pose an existing danger to our set of democratic norms. So I agree with Brian. So far the courts have done their job. That might not hold, but there is also a series of things that Trump has done that signals we're in for a really rocky road, and that people have to be ready to raise their voice at really, really, really loud, perhaps unprecedented levels.
Let me reframe the question a little bit then, because there are folks. I get that we don't want to give in and do anticipatory fear for what hasn't even happened yet, given the fact that there's already so much shit that's happened that is worthy of focusing on. But I guess to give a little bit of relief to folks who are watching this all play out, is there a plan then in the event that some of the worst of what he could do does play itself out?
I worry a little bit about this. Is there a plan? Politics in a campaign or in a legislative context, or if you play chess or you play poker, You cannot come in and say, if he does this, I'm going to do this. If he does this, we have to actually be responsive. And because they're in charge of the government, we cannot map out our strategy for the next 3 months. We are working strategically, but that's different from being able to articulate, here's what we're going to do on March 14th, here's what we're going to do on March 22nd. That's not actually how this works. We have a strategy, and Corey has talked about it a lot, but it's basically where we can use legislative leverage, we will do so. Where we can significantly slow down the process, we will do so. But really, to me, in addition to the court battles, what we need to help to do is build a citizen movement. Any movement that has successfully fought autocracy has had the moral high ground and the political high ground of not 500 people at an office or 300 people at a town hall, but hundreds of thousands of people peacefully in the streets standing up for American democracy. So to me, our collective goal is to build that citizen movement. We have a role to play in exercising power where we have it, but the only way you beat autocracy is with people power.
Yeah, look, I'm going to say a couple things. One is, first of all, the three of us have been at this a long time. Trump won, we would meet, we would discuss what are the options and levers that we have to pull, and inevitably you've said them. There's the sort of the legislative levers that we have, the procedural levers that we have. We have been meeting with and working with Democratic attorney generals and the lawsuits that they're filing. But the biggest power that we have that worked in Trump 1 to stop the healthcare efforts to pull away healthcare from millions of Americans, to even now, we've seen that the throwback pitch of this last most important power, it worked when they tried to cut all federal funding. And really, that is the collective voices that we all have to rise up and shout it out. And for me, here we are, it's February, it's Black History. In some of the worst, most atrocious moments of governmental power of the past, where authoritarianism in its worst formats, I've been talking a lot about the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, the election of 1876, the outcome, which was basically Tilden won the popular vote, Hayes won the Electoral College, and the bargain was, okay, the Republicans can have the presidency, but Reconstruction is over in the South, pull out federal troops, which led to one of the worst periods of terrorism literally in our country's history, where black elected officials were being dragged out in the streets, beaten, lynching spiked up, Klan ruling. It was a horrific time, but yet these citizen activists like Ida B. Wells started coming up and saying, we will not let this go. She used to talk about shining the light of truth into the darkness. And what she was able to do was to galvanize a nation against lynching and against a lot of the other atrocities that were going on by exposing them and ultimately planting the seeds that allowed sort of future movements to happen. So I know we're not there and we're not seeing that level of violence, but yet at the same time, that kind of resistance, that kind of truth-telling, that kind of never say die, I'm going to stand up for the most vaunted principles of our country relentlessly, actually is power. And to me, that's what we need right now. I know I sit in meetings with these guys and others about trying to tactically, all the things we can do here. I'm happy about what's going on in the courts, but your voice, our collective voices matter and can make a difference.
Can I just put a fine point on this? The reason that we're talking about public action, right, is because there actually isn't a built-in solution in the system if the president decides to violate an order of the court, right? Because the Supreme Court doesn't have an army at its disposal. The Congress doesn't have police to go out and execute a court order. So the Constitution doesn't really have an answer for what happens if a president says, you know what, I don't agree with that court order, I'm doing whatever the hell I want. But Brian is right. It's happened before. It's happened in many countries and many democracies around the world, and it's the people that ultimately put enough pressure on the system nonviolently to be able to restore that order. That doesn't mean that we don't have an obligation to protest, to lead, to make their life as hard as possible. But ultimately, it's a cooperative relationship between people like us that are in positions of power and the people who ultimately are the ones that can provide that check that is not really built into the Constitution in the case that the executive just says, forget it, I'm not paying attention to the courts.
Well, look, you guys are some of the most effective messengers that we have in the Senate, and I do like to focus on the issue of media. That's the space that I work in. Is there any worry that as we see the way that Republicans have consolidated support among the folks who own media platforms, how they've really been able to entrench themselves as, influencers, content creators on the right, that the deck is so stacked against Democrats by virtue of the Elons of the world, the Zuckerbergs of the world, the Shoes of the world, who are content to heap money into Trump's pockets, content to align themselves with the right, that it is an insurmountable battle to be able to message people when really the folks who are in charge of the algorithms are stacked against us?
Right now they have a better right-wing ecosystem than we have. They're getting tens of millions of more views of right-wing content, and that's a disadvantage. I know this because I watch utter lies become almost accepted truths by the mainstream, like this idea that millions of condoms were sent to Gaza. Gaza. I mean, that is an utter factual lie, but I bump into people who have seen it 60 times on their feed, on their scroll. That's what we're fighting against. And so that's my worry, is that people don't understand that this ecosystem of truth, or the ecosystem of facts, or the ecosystem that is progressive, it right now has to rise up. It has to form. People have to be understanding that they play a role as a citizen truth teller to be engaged in this space, because if not, we're going to continue to lose out to these folks. And the last thing I'll say is, Elon Musk controls X. Yes, there are bot farms in Russia focused on, we're up against all of that, but that still doesn't mean that we're powerless. And that's why you're sitting here, and that's why you create the content you create. It's why I spend so much time digitally, not just for myself on my own platforms, but trying to work with the rest of my caucus to lean into what is 21st century communications.
I want to talk about that asymmetry, because I think that when we see these lies being perpetuated by Carolyn Levitt at the White House and then amplified by Elon Musk, he was questioned about that, and he just said, well, some of the things that I say are going to be inaccurate. But that's not until he's already shown 46 million people, which was how many impressions he got for that condom lie, that Gaza condom lie on Twitter, before they've already seen that. And so there is that asymmetry at play where you don't see Democrats just perpetuating the lie only to then say, I was wrong, my bad. They're content to clean up after the fact only because they know that they've already gotten what they need out of it. And again, we don't see that on our side.
Well, we don't want to turn into a bunch of liars either, but I do think that and Chris and I have talked a little bit about this, that a lot of lawyers on the Senate Democrats, I'm not one, but there are a lot of people who are very precise, very responsible, and want to get all their facts straight before they start to allege something or assert something. And, Chris's point to me is like, do they deserve the benefit of the doubt if they're not sharing any information with us? It'd be one thing if, the normal course of business, you call the Office of Legislative Affairs of the other party, they give you the information, maybe you send a letter, right? And letters sound so feckless now. Yeah. Maybe you send a letter, they send you a letter back, you get the information. But lacking the information, we should probably not give them the benefit of the doubt anymore.
And first of all, you saying the word letter, I'm sure, sent chills down the spines of every single person who's watching, because it's the perfect microcosm for.
You should see my text strings with my staff. I'm like, another fucking letter,
another strongly worded letter. Like that's gonna solve it this time.
I love my staff.
But first of all, the way our government was designed is everything is going to move slower than my generation lower wants things to move. We're a system of checks and balances. Things have to work their way through the court. The whole legislative process. The one way that we could try to stand up to Trump's blitzkrieg of illegal actions is by calling it out and rising up with our truth, with our light, with our really our willingness to in an unfettered manner to call the crap out. And so that's why I'm just so urgently want folks to not wait but to start calling bullshit right now. Like, you drew a line from starting with the January 6th pardons right away of people who beat, viciously injured, spinal injuries, skull injuries, police officers. I draw that as a consistent line that's continuing to coming through all the way to the point where deciding whether you prosecute the mayor of New York, that decision didn't come from the U.S. attorneys or other, it came from the top of the Justice Department, and we know how, in my opinion, corrupt that is. It is an upending of what we know to be the rule of law in this country. It's an upending of constitutional norms. And the only way we're going to stop that, and I have a lot of faith actually in the courts and ultimately, but these are things that are going to go on, there's decisions we made, appeals and the like. The most powerful way to stop injustice, as I see it again, especially here we are again in Black History Month, the most powerful way to stop injustice is for popular movements to rise up and do it.
How do you guys think about dealing with this idea of conferring goodwill onto the Republican Party in an era where we see, for example, that when Democrats had control during the CARES Act, right? This was before Joe Biden took office. In the CARES Act, all Democrats voted for the CARES Act, even though doing so would give a political win, to Donald Trump. Joe Biden takes office, tries to pass the American Rescue Plan, does so only with Democratic votes. I'm not sure if he had a couple of Republican votes, but in any case, there was no reciprocation there. And we see that over and over, where when Democrats have control, they'll make concessions to pass the bipartisan infrastructure law, the bipartisan gun safety law. They will name the bills in such a way that people know it was a bipartisan venture to give some credit to Republicans. Turn around and we see a situation where, Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court, for example. We have a new rule: no appointments to the Supreme Court in an election year, except for Amy Coney Barrett when votes are quite literally being cast. And so there is a recurring theme where goodwill is conferred onto the right that isn't reciprocated onto the left. And so has that impacted how you're thinking of working with the Republicans? And I know that means that we enter into an era of even more acrimony and less compromise and more dysfunction within the government. But does the fact that there is that asymmetry and that goodwill isn't reciprocated, does that make you think differently if we're in a position where we regain the majority, that's going to be offered up?
Well, I'm not going to permanently give up on the idea that we can find bipartisan compromise. I mean, you pointed out the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act as maybe a moment of democratic weakness that we cooperated with Republicans. Well, yeah, we passed a bill that wasn't ideal. It wasn't everything that we wanted, but since we passed that bill with some Republicans supporting it, murders have gone down in this country by 20%. That was a good thing. The question is, can you work with Republicans in the middle of a constitutional crisis when democracy is on the line? And right now, I think that this crisis is serious and deepening in its seriousness, that our job, number one, number two, and number three, is to save our democracy. And so that means, for me, when it comes to nominees, there might be one or two of these nominees that on their face are kind of mainstream conservative thinkers, but I'm not going to support somebody that's going to implement a blatantly illegal policy like withholding federal funds from not-for-profits in my state that are legally due the money that Congress authorized. So no, I don't think that we should give up on the idea that once this constitutional crisis is solved, either inside Congress or from pressure outside of Congress, that we can get some things done together. But right now, the focus has to be on protecting our democracy and protecting the wholesale theft of our government by this billionaire class.
I just want to double down on that point. We lose in America if we give in to this idea that we can't find common ground in this country. And the way we've done big things from civil...
I'm just going to put out some
props?
Some drinks for us.
Okay.
Just in case you want one.
I really appreciate you doing it.
Just in case. All right. Just in case.
I feel like we have to talk about the elephant in the room. I just
want to make sure that people have refreshments.
I was told that you were a fan of Diet Mountain Dew because was regular Mountain Dew unhealthy, and so Diet Mountain Dew offers you something that regular Mountain Dew...
Mountain Dew is disgusting. Diet Mountain Dew is delicious. No? Is that not true?
Would you be able to tell the difference between the two?
Yes, you can tell the difference between Diet and Mountain Dew. Have you never partake? Are you that much of a purist?
I haven't
to your
drank
body? Is your body a temple?
I haven't drank Mountain Dew since I was maybe 9 years
Me
old.
too.
what
You
is
know
your-
why? Because I'm a grown man.
A grown-ass adult has not drank
coffee.
Mountain Dew.
Yeah, I know.
You need to get caffeine inside of you.
Yeah, we need to reclaim the youth vote.
Diet Mountain Dew. is a
Booker,
good-
back to your point.
I mean, this is just that's very.
I'll put them away.
That's quite a thing. My point again is we need to be a nation that we can come together around big ideas and big things. And I can go through the major legislation historically that we've done together as a nation. And of course, you have people that don't vote on both sides. But to Chris's point, the Bipartisan CHIPS Act, this is a big game-changing bill that we were able to do together. Biggest infrastructure investment, bigger than Eisenhower Highway Act, was the infrastructure bill that we did in a bipartisan way. That's a big thing for our country. These are huge victories, and they actually show presidential strength and congressional strength. Donald Trump is not showing strength right now. Does our government need to stop waste, fraud, and abuse? Absolutely. Are there big things we can do? Yeah, I sat with John McCain before and talked about the corruption in the military and the incredible waste that was there and how we need to change it so we can have better fighting force and more efficiently spent money. But the reality is the way Donald Trump is doing it right now is evidencing his weakness, that he can't come before the nation and put together a plan. It's not like how Clinton, who was the last person that balanced the budget, got rid of the deficit, started taking down the debt. And so I never want people to come away from this to say that the way we are more successful is we become more like the worst of the Republican efforts that are going on right now. That is letting somebody drag you so low that you lose who you are. The last thing I want to say, though, that doesn't mean in a moment of existential crisis that we don't fight with everything we have, using the tools and tactics that we can to stop them. There is a long history in our nation of stopping authoritarian efforts, to stopping people who want to scrap our constitutional ideals. And again, it's always come by noble people in this place that fight well, but always by everyone realizing I have agency, I have power, I have voice, and I'm going to use it in this moment that my country is calling me, where my country's very values are at stake. I'm going to not be on the sideline. I'm going to be a foot soldier for this democracy and engage, and that's what we need right now.
Sounds like the perfect place to leave off. Thank you guys for joining.